Settle in and let the world grow quiet around you. This is a gentle story about a bubble boy who has never felt the wind on his skin, never stepped outside his room, and never seen the world except through glass. His life has been safe, calm, and carefully controlled until one day something changes. As you listen, imagine soft footsteps, distant roads, and a quiet journey unfolding at a slow, peaceful pace. There's no rush here, no sharp turns, just a steady drift through a story of curiosity, courage, and the calm discovery of something new. Now, close your eyes and let the night carry you gently into dreams. Jimmy's life began differently from most children. From the moment he was born, it was clear that his body could not fight off even the smallest germs. Because of this, he had to remain in the hospital, surrounded by strict medical care. A single cold or tiny infection could have been enough to end his life, so every breath he took had to be protected. For 4 years, the hospital became his entire world. Doctors and nurses carefully monitored everything around him, making sure that nothing harmful could reach him. His parents stayed close, especially his mother, who devoted herself completely to keeping him safe. Every touch, every object, and every movement had to follow strict rules. When Jimmy turned 4, something changed. His parents were finally allowed to bring him home. It should have been a joyful moment, and in many ways it was. But his home was not like any other. Waiting for him was a carefully prepared room, sealed off from the outside world. Inside that room stood a large, transparent bubble. This bubble would become Jimmy's new home. It was designed to keep him safe from germs and illness. Attached to it were special retractable arms that allowed his mother to reach inside without exposing him to danger. Through those arms, she could feed him, care for him, and even hold his hand in her own way. Jimmy accepted this life without complaint. Despite his unusual situation, he grew up cheerful and grateful. He loved his parents deeply and trusted them completely. His mother, Mrs. Livingston, took on many roles in his life. She was not only his caregiver but also his teacher, his barber, and his guide to the world beyond the bubble. She chose what he learned, what he watched, and even what he read. Everything that entered Jimmy's bubble had to pass through a decontamination chamber first. Food, books, toys, nothing was allowed inside without being cleaned thoroughly. Even the cookies he ate were specially prepared, often made from soy and far from delicious. Still, Jimmy never complained. He appreciated everything he was given. Outside his window, life continued as normal for everyone else. Neighborhood children played, laughed, and ran freely. Sometimes, a few boys would stop by Jimmy's window, not to be kind, but to tease him. They called him names and made fun of his unusual life. But whenever that happened, his mother was quick to defend him, chasing them away and reminding Jimmy that he was special. As the years passed, Jimmy grew into a teenager. While other kids his age dreamed of cars and freedom, his parents gave him something different for his 16th birthday, an electric guitar. It became his favorite possession. With it, he could express himself, pass the time, and feel connected to something beyond the walls of his room. He spent hours each day playing, losing himself in music. Though his world was small, Jimmy found ways to feel joy. He watched television, read magazines, and imagined what life outside might be like. But deep down, There was always a quiet curiosity about the world he could see but never truly touch. Everything began to change the day a new family moved into the neighborhood. Among them was a girl named Chloe. From the moment Jimmy noticed her, something stirred inside him that he had never felt before. She was kind, lively, and full of the freedom he had always dreamed about. He began to spend more and more time near his window, carefully cleaning it just so he could see her more clearly. For the first time in his life, Jimmy wasn't just observing the world. He was longing to be part of it. Chloe quickly became the center of Jimmy's attention. Every day after school, he would wait by the window, hoping to catch a glimpse of her. What began as simple curiosity soon grew into something much deeper. For Jimmy, who had spent his entire life separated from others, these small moments felt incredibly important. Chloe, on the other hand, had no idea at first. One afternoon, after school, she was riding home with a group of classmates. As they passed by her house, the conversation turned toward the strange boy who lived next door. They spoke about Jimmy in whispers and jokes, repeating rumors they barely understood. Some said he was dangerous. Others claimed he had a terrible disease that could spread. Chloe didn't like what she heard. Their words felt unfair and unkind, especially since none of them had ever truly met him. As soon as the car stopped, she stepped out, clearly annoyed, and decided to find out the truth for herself. She walked straight to the Livingston house and knocked on the door. Jimmy's father, Morton, answered. He was surprised to see her, but welcomed her inside politely before heading to the kitchen. Chloe looked around, noticing how unusual the house felt. It was quiet, almost too quiet, and there was a large air tunnel running through the space. Curious, she followed it. The tunnel led her upstairs, and before long, she found herself standing outside Jimmy's room. Inside, she saw the bubble and the boy who lived within it. Their eyes met for the first time. At first, there was a brief moment of awkward silence, but it didn't last long. Almost immediately, they discovered something they had in common. Both of them loved the same television show, Land of the Lost. That shared interest became the bridge that connected them, making conversation easy and natural. For Jimmy, it was an incredible moment. He was talking to someone his own age, someone who wasn't his parent, and someone who didn't treat him like he was strange. While talking, Chloe noticed the guitar resting nearby. When she learned that Jimmy could play, she asked if he could teach her. He agreed without hesitation. The very next day she returned, and then the next day, and the day after that. Soon it became a routine. Chloe would visit Jimmy regularly, sitting outside the bubble while he played music and guided her through the basics. They laughed, talked, and shared stories. Their friendship grew stronger with each passing day. For Jimmy, these visits meant everything. They brought color into his otherwise limited world. For Chloe, it was a chance to connect with someone genuine and kind. Still, Mrs. Livingston was always nearby. She kept a close watch on their interactions, making sure that nothing risky happened. Even though Chloe meant no harm, Jimmy's mother never let her guard down. She reminded Jimmy, in subtle ways, that his world had boundaries that could not be crossed. Despite this, the friendship continued to blossom. As the months passed, Chloe became more than just a friend to Jimmy. She became the person he looked forward to seeing every day, the person who made him feel less alone. During Christmas, Chloe brought him a special gift, a small guinea pig. She wanted Jimmy to have a companion, something that could keep him company even when she wasn't there. Jimmy was deeply touched. It was one of the most thoughtful gifts he had ever received. For a while, everything felt perfect. But life, even in a small and protected world, has a way of changing. One evening, months later, Chloe climbed through Jimmy's window carrying drinks. It was her birthday, and she had just come from a party. She seemed a little sad, explaining that her best friend hadn't shown up. So instead of celebrating elsewhere, she decided to bring the celebration to Jimmy. They talked and laughed like they always did, but something felt different that night. There was a quiet tension in the air, something unspoken. At one point, Chloe moved toward the decontamination chamber. She intended to go inside, to get closer to Jimmy than ever before. It was a bold and risky choice, but her feelings pushed her forward. However, before anything could happen, exhaustion took over. She fell asleep before entering the bubble. The moment passed quietly, leaving behind a sense of what might have been. For Jimmy, it was both comforting and confusing. He didn't fully understand his feelings yet, but he knew one thing for certain. Chloe had become the most important person in his world. Time continued to move forward, and with it, changes came that Jimmy could not control. Months passed, and Chloe eventually reached an important milestone. She graduated from high school. It was a proud and exciting moment in her life, filled with celebrations, plans, and new beginnings. For Jimmy, however, it marked the beginning of something much more difficult. With graduation came new people, new priorities, and new relationships. One day, Chloe arrived at Jimmy's room accompanied by a young man named Mark. He carried himself with confidence, the kind that made it clear he was used to being part of the world Jimmy had never experienced. Chloe introduced him casually, as if it were nothing unusual, but for Jimmy, everything suddenly felt different. After a brief introduction, Chloe excused herself, leaving the two boys alone. The silence between them was uncomfortable. Mark looked around the room with curiosity, his eyes lingering on the bubble. Without much thought, he lit a cigarette. The smoke drifted dangerously close to the delicate environment that kept Jimmy alive. For Jimmy, it wasn't just careless. It was terrifying. The bubble that protected him could have been ruined in an instant. Thankfully, Chloe returned before anything serious happened. But the moment had already left its mark. Jimmy watched as the two of them left together, laughing and talking as they disappeared from view. It was the first time he truly felt what it meant to be left behind. From that day on, things were no longer the same. Chloe still visited, but not as often. Her time was divided now, shared with someone else. Jimmy tried to ignore the growing feeling in his chest, but it became harder with each passing day. 2 years went by. During that time, Chloe and Mark remained together. Their relationship grew stronger, and their future seemed to be moving in a clear direction. Jimmy, however, remained in the same place, inside his bubble, watching life continue without him. One day, while standing near his window, Jimmy overheard a conversation between Chloe and Mark. They were talking about their relationship, about taking things further. Mark wanted to move faster, but Chloe hesitated. She said she wanted to wait until after they were married. The word married echoed in Jimmy's mind, felt heavy, final. Unable to hold in his feelings any longer, Jimmy turned to his mother. He shared his sadness, his confusion, and the pain he didn't fully understand. He hoped she might comfort him, reassure him that everything would be okay. But her response was harsh. Mrs. Livingston told him that she had tried to warn him. She said that girls like Chloe would eventually leave, that they didn't belong in his world. According to her, Chloe didn't truly love him. She only felt sorry for him. Her words cut deeply. She went even further, saying that no woman would ever choose someone who couldn't even touch her. For Jimmy, who had never known physical connection, this truth felt overwhelming. The conversation left him shaken. Days later, Chloe came to visit again. This time, she carried important news. Her expression was a mix of excitement and nervousness. She told Jimmy that Mark had asked her to marry him. The wedding, she explained, would take place the following Saturday at Niagara Falls. Jimmy listened quietly, trying to hide the storm of emotions building inside him. Chloe then asked him a question, one that meant more than she probably realized. She wanted to know if he thought Mark was the right person for her. Jimmy couldn't answer. The words wouldn't come out. His silence spoke louder than anything he could have said. Chloe looked disappointed, but she didn't press him. Instead, she mentioned that she had brought him something. She placed a box inside the decontamination chamber, waiting for him to take it. But Jimmy, overwhelmed by his emotions, made a decision he would soon regret. Instead of accepting her gift, he returned the guinea pig she had given him months before. He told her he didn't want it anymore. The moment felt cold and distant. Chloe stood there, hurt and confused. Without another word, she turned and left. The room felt emptier than ever. Jimmy sat alone, replaying everything that had just happened. It quickly became the worst day of his life. The anger he had felt began to fade, replaced by regret. After some time, he finally gathered the courage to open the box Chloe had left behind. Inside, he found a carefully made globe. It was simple but meaningful, a symbol of the world he had never been able to explore. Attached to it was a note. In it, Chloe expressed her feelings. She told him that she loved him. The words hit Jimmy harder than anything else. Realizing what he had done, he felt a deep sense of guilt. He had pushed away the one person who truly cared about him. But this time, he didn't want to just sit and watch. For the first time in his life, Jimmy decided to act. He would not let Chloe go without trying. He would leave the bubble. Jimmy did not sleep that night. The note Chloe had left behind stayed in his hands for hours. He read it again and again, as if the words might change, or as if he might somehow wake up and realize it was all a dream. But it wasn't. She loved him, and he had pushed her away. The thought would not leave him. For the first time in his life, Jimmy felt something stronger than fear. It was stronger than the rules he had lived by, stronger than the walls around him, stronger even than the bubble that had protected him for so many years. He had to go after her. Niagara Falls was far away, and the wedding was only days away. If he wanted to reach her in time, he would have to leave immediately. But leaving wasn't simple. Everything about his life had been designed to keep him inside. So Jimmy began to build. Using everything he could find in his room, he worked tirelessly to create a suit, a smaller version of the bubble that could move with him. It had to protect him from the outside world while allowing him to travel. Every piece had to fit perfectly. Every seal had to be secure. He worked for hours without stopping. When he finally finished, the suit stood before him like a fragile hope. It wasn't perfect, but it was his only chance. There was no turning back. Jimmy carefully stepped inside the suit and sealed it. For a moment, he stood still, listening to his own breathing echo inside the small space. It felt strange, different from the large bubble he had always known. Then he took his first step. It didn't go well. He stumbled almost immediately, losing his balance and crashing to the floor. The suit made movement difficult, and every step felt unnatural. But Jimmy didn't give up. He got up and tried again, and again. Eventually, he began to understand how to move. His steps became steadier, more controlled. It wasn't easy, but it was enough. His next challenge was the door. Jimmy had never opened it himself before. It had always been a boundary, something that separated his safe world from everything else. Now it stood between him and the journey he needed to take. He reached for it, hesitated for just a moment, and then pushed. It didn't open at first. He tried again, using more strength. The door resisted, as if it didn't want to let him go. But Jimmy refused to stop. After several attempts, it finally gave way. The door opened. For the first time in many years, Jimmy stepped outside his room. The house felt unfamiliar, even though he had lived there his entire life. Every corner seemed new, every detail sharper. He moved slowly at first, taking in everything around him. Then he reached the front door. This moment felt even bigger. Beyond that door was the outside world. The air, the sounds, the unknown. Jimmy paused, his heart racing. Fear crept in, reminding him of everything he had been told his whole life. But then he thought of Chloe. That was enough. He opened the door and stepped outside. The world greeted him all at once. The light felt brighter. The air seemed alive, and the space around him stretched endlessly. For a moment, he simply stood there, overwhelmed by the beauty and intensity of it all. Then he smiled. It was the first time he had truly experienced the world, and even through the barrier of his suit, it felt incredible. But there was no time to waste. Jimmy quickly began moving, heading toward the bus station. Each step became easier as he adjusted to the suit. Soon, he was not just walking, he was moving with purpose. When he arrived at the station, he approached the attendant and explained that he needed to get to Niagara Falls. The man informed him of the price of the ticket, $260. Jimmy froze. He didn't have that kind of money. For a moment, it felt like everything might fall apart before it even began. But he refused to give up. If one plan didn't work, he would find another. He left the station and stepped out onto the street, thinking of what to do next. That's when it happened. As he crossed the road, a yellow bus came speeding toward him. Before he could react, it struck him, sending him tumbling across the pavement. Everything went silent for a moment. Then voices filled the air. The driver and a group of passengers rushed over to check on him. They were part of what seemed to be a musical group, lively and energetic. To their surprise, Jimmy was still alive, protected by his unusual suit. After hearing his story, they offered him a ride. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a chance. Jimmy accepted. As the bus drove off, the group began to sing and play music. Their energy filled the space, turning the journey into something unexpected and joyful. For Jimmy, it was another first. Traveling with others, sharing laughter, feeling part of something. For a little while, everything felt right. But back at home, things were very different. That morning, Mrs. Livingston went to bring Jimmy his usual coffee. When she entered his room, she stopped. The bubble was empty. Panic took over instantly. Jimmy was gone. Jimmy's journey had truly begun, but it did not take long for him to realize that the world outside was far more complicated than he had imagined. At first, the ride on the bus felt like a miracle. The group that had picked him up was lively, full of energy, and constantly singing. Jimmy found himself smiling, even laughing along with them. For someone who had spent his entire life in isolation, this felt like freedom. But that feeling didn't last. As the journey continued, Jimmy began to notice things that didn't quite make sense. The people around him spoke in strange ways, and their behavior grew more unusual. Eventually, he learned the truth: they weren't a musical group at all. They were part of a cult. When Jimmy reacted with confusion and discomfort, the group became offended. They didn't like being misunderstood, and before long, their friendliness disappeared. Without much warning, they stopped the bus and forced Jimmy to get off. He was left alone. The bus drove away, leaving him standing in the middle of a vast, empty desert. For the first time since leaving home, Jimmy felt truly lost. The sun was high, the land stretched endlessly in every direction, and there was no sign of help. Still, he didn't give up. He began walking, step by step, determined to keep moving forward. Hours passed. The heat drained his energy, and eventually he couldn't go any further. He lay down on the ground to rest, staring up at the sky through the clear surface of his suit. That's when he noticed something circling above him. A vulture. The bird slowly descended, drawn by the sight of what it thought might be an easy meal. Jimmy quickly sat up, startled, and tried to scare it away. But the bird wasn't easily discouraged. It followed him, hopping and flapping its wings as if waiting for him to give up. Panicked, Jimmy got to his feet and ran. The sight of him running through the desert, chased by a stubborn bird, would have seemed almost comical if it weren't so real. After a frantic struggle, he finally managed to escape, leaving the vulture behind. Exhausted but determined, Jimmy continued walking. Meanwhile, back home, his parents were searching for him. After speaking with the bus station attendant, they learned that Jimmy had been trying to reach Niagara Falls. Without wasting any time, they began following his trail, desperate to bring him back safely. Out on the road, Jimmy's luck finally began to change. He came across a man struggling with a broken motorcycle. The man, a biker named Slim, was trying to fix it but clearly needed help. Jimmy, using his careful observation and patience, managed to assist him. Slim was impressed. After hearing Jimmy's story, he decided to help him in return. He offered Jimmy a ride toward Niagara Falls. For Jimmy, it was another unexpected act of kindness from a stranger. As they traveled together, Slim shared a story from his own past. He spoke about a woman he had once loved, someone he cared for deeply, but she had left him to marry someone else. The memory still hurt, and Slim didn't want Jimmy to go through the same kind of regret. Encouraged by Slim's words, Jimmy felt even more determined to reach Chloe in time. They set off toward Las Vegas. Elsewhere, the group that had abandoned Jimmy gathered again in the desert. Their spiritual leader revealed that they were searching for someone special, a chosen one. According to their beliefs, this person would be revealed in a unique way. When the leader uncovered a stone they were studying, they saw an image of a boy surrounded by a glowing shell. The group immediately thought of Jimmy. Convinced that he was the one they were searching for, they decided to find him again. Back on the road, Jimmy and Slim eventually arrived in Las Vegas. The city was unlike anything Jimmy had ever seen. Bright lights, loud sounds, and endless activity surrounded him. Even through his suit, he could feel the excitement in the air. Slim suggested they take a short break. Inside one of the casinos, Jimmy experienced things he had never imagined. At one point, he even became part of a performance, passed around by the audience like a strange but fascinating attraction. It was overwhelming but also thrilling. Later, Slim encouraged him to try the slot machines. Time passed quickly, and before Jimmy realized it, the night was nearly gone. He began to worry about his mission, but Slim wasn't ready to leave. He wanted to win money before continuing. Jimmy couldn't wait any longer. Determined to keep moving, he took a small scooter he had won during the games and quietly left without saying goodbye. For the first time since starting his journey, Jimmy was completely on his own again. But this time he wasn't afraid. He had a destination, and he wasn't going to stop. Jimmy rode the small scooter out of Las Vegas, leaving behind the bright lights and noise of the city. The road ahead stretched long and uncertain, but he didn't hesitate. Every second mattered now. The wedding was getting closer, and he still had a long way to go. As he traveled, the world continued to surprise him. Back in Las Vegas, Slim searched for Jimmy, worried that the boy had left on his own. While looking around, he ran into the same strange group that had abandoned Jimmy in the desert. This time, things quickly turned hostile. In the chaos, Slim's motorcycle was destroyed, leaving him stranded and frustrated. Meanwhile, Jimmy continued forward, unaware of everything happening behind him. Not long after leaving the city, his journey took an unexpected turn. While crossing a road, he was struck again, this time by a vehicle that sent him crashing into a nearby train car. Though the impact was strong, his protective suit kept him safe. When Jimmy looked around, he realized he wasn't alone. The train car was filled with unusual performers, members of a traveling circus. Each one looked different, dressed in colorful and sometimes strange outfits. They stared at Jimmy with curiosity, just as surprised by him as he was by them. One of them quickly warned him. If their leader, known as Dr. Freak, found Jimmy, he might try to make him part of the show. The thought made Jimmy uneasy, but before he could leave, the door opened. Dr. Freak entered. To Jimmy's surprise, the man wasn't what he had imagined. He was much smaller than expected, but his presence was intense. When Jimmy reacted with surprise, Dr. Freak became angry, thinking he was being mocked. The situation escalated quickly. Dr. Freak tried to force Jimmy to stay, insisting that he would be a perfect addition to the circus. Jimmy refused, determined to continue his journey. A struggle followed, and in the chaos, Dr. Freak was knocked down. For a moment, everything went still. The other performers thought their leader might be seriously hurt. Seeing Jimmy's determination, they decided not to stop him. Instead, they let him go, respecting his need to continue alone. Jimmy left the train and made his way to a nearby roadside restaurant. Inside, he witnessed something troubling. A group of men were mocking another man because of his beliefs. They spoke harshly and treated him unfairly. Jimmy, despite his situation, couldn't ignore what was happening. He stepped in. The men turned their attention toward him, confused by his strange suit. A sheriff questioned Jimmy, asking why he was inside the bubble. When Jimmy explained that he had no immunity, the group misunderstood. They thought his condition was contagious. Fear spread quickly. One by one, the men rushed out of the restaurant, desperate to get away. In the confusion, a lamp was knocked over, crashing to the floor. A fire started. Flames began to spread, and panic filled the room. Jimmy tried to escape, but the situation was becoming dangerous. Just when things seemed hopeless, the man who had been mocked earlier rushed in to help. He was known as Push Pop. Together, they managed to escape the burning building. Outside, they didn't waste time. They climbed into an ice cream and curry truck and drove away as fast as they could. Moments later, the fire grew stronger, and the building exploded behind them. Jimmy looked back, realizing how close he had come to danger. As they drove, the road stretched out ahead once more. For a while, things were calm. Jimmy, exhausted from everything he had experienced, eventually fell asleep. During his rest, he had a strange dream. In it, Chloe was in danger, chased by a creature from one of his favorite shows. Just as things seemed hopeless, Mark appeared and saved her. Jimmy tried to reach her, but he couldn't. He woke up suddenly, shaken by the image. The dream left him uneasy. At that moment, Push Pop was startled as well. In the confusion, he accidentally hit a cow on the road. The accident upset him deeply, as the animal held great importance in his beliefs. Jimmy tried to comfort him, but his words didn't help much. The situation became awkward and tense. After a while, Push Pop decided it would be best for Jimmy to continue on his own. Before leaving, he handed Jimmy a popsicle. Jimmy accepted it and continued his journey. As he tasted the frozen treat, his face lit up. It was unlike anything he had ever experienced before. For a brief moment, he forgot about everything else. Even in the middle of a difficult journey, Jimmy was still discovering the simple joys of the world for the first time. And he kept moving forward. Jimmy continued down the road, holding on to the small moments of joy that kept him going. The popsicle he had been given was simple, but to him it felt like something extraordinary. Every new experience reminded him how much of the world he had missed, and how much he still wanted to see. But time was running out. Back on the road behind him, everything was beginning to come together. His parents were still searching. The strange cult group was chasing what they believed was their chosen one, and the circus performers, now without their leader, were also moving in his direction. Even Slim, determined not to give up, continued trying to find Jimmy. All of them were heading toward the same place, Niagara Falls. Meanwhile, Jimmy reached another town. Tired but focused, he looked for a way to travel faster. Walking and riding small vehicles would not be enough to get him there in time. He needed something more reliable. That's when he met a taxi driver. The man listened to Jimmy's request and agreed to take him to Niagara Falls. But the price was high, $500. Jimmy didn't have that kind of money, and for a moment it seemed like another dead end. But then he noticed something. Nearby, there was a bar hosting a contest with a cash prize of exactly $500. It was his chance. Without hesitation, Jimmy entered. The challenge was unusual. He had to compete in a messy game against two women inside a tub of paint. It was nothing like anything he had ever done before. Still, he didn't hesitate. He focused on the goal, ignoring how strange the situation was. After a chaotic and colorful struggle, Jimmy won. For the first time since leaving home, he held enough money to take control of his journey. He quickly paid the taxi driver and got inside, ready to continue. But just as things seemed to be going smoothly, trouble appeared again. The cult members found him. They surrounded him, convinced that he was the special person they had been searching for. They tried to take him away, speaking in confusing and intense ways. Jimmy struggled, trying to break free. At that moment, help arrived from an unexpected place. The circus performers showed up. Recognizing Jimmy, they rushed in to help him escape. To blend in and get close, they even disguised themselves in similar clothing to the cult members. The situation quickly turned chaotic as the two groups clashed. As if that wasn't enough, Slim and a group of bikers also arrived, adding to the confusion. Vehicles, shouting, and movement filled the scene as everyone seemed to collide at once. In the middle of it all, Jimmy saw his chance. He ran. Dodging the chaos behind him, he jumped into the taxi and urged the driver to leave immediately. The car sped away, leaving the others behind. For a moment, there was finally peace. As they drove, the taxi driver began to share stories from his past. He spoke about love, loss, and choices that had shaped his life. Jimmy listened quietly, thinking about his own situation. Eventually, exhaustion caught up with him again, and he fell asleep. When he woke up, something felt wrong. The driver was still sitting upright, hands on the wheel, eyes open, but he wasn't responding. Panic filled Jimmy's chest. He thought the man had died while driving. The car continued moving forward. Jimmy looked ahead and saw that the road was ending. Fear took over. He quickly unbuckled himself, preparing to jump out before it was too late. Just as he was about to leap, the driver suddenly turned the wheel sharply. The car swerved, and Jimmy was thrown violently from his seat, crashing into a nearby billboard. Everything spun for a moment. When he finally regained his senses, he found himself inside a large storage area filled with stacks of beer cans. The journey had taken another unexpected turn. But even now, Jimmy didn't stop. He got up, steadied himself, and looked for a way forward. No matter how many obstacles stood in his path, he had made one thing clear. He would reach Chloe. This could be his chance. Jimmy rushed to it and quickly dialed Chloe's number. His heart pounded as he waited, hoping she would answer. After everything he had been through, all he wanted was to hear her voice. But it wasn't Chloe who picked up. It was Mark. The moment Jimmy realized who he was speaking to, his excitement turned into disappointment. Mark listened for a second, then told Jimmy to stop interfering and go back home. His tone was cold and dismissive. Without giving Jimmy a chance to explain, he ended the call. Jimmy stood there in silence. The distance between him and Chloe suddenly felt greater than ever. But even then, he didn't give up. If he couldn't reach her directly, he would keep moving forward. He made another call, this time to his home. When the phone rang, it was his mother who answered. The moment she heard Jimmy's voice, her relief was overwhelming. She asked where he was, desperate to bring him back safely. Jimmy told her. Soon after, his parents arrived at the warehouse. His mother was frantic, while his father remained calmer, though clearly worried. They had finally found him after chasing his trail across so many places. Jimmy felt torn. Part of him wanted to go back, to return to the safety he had always known. But another part, the stronger part, refused to give up on Chloe. As they spoke, Jimmy noticed a drink nearby. Curious, he picked up a bottle of beer. It was something Chloe had once mentioned liking, and he wanted to understand even the smallest things about her world. He asked if he could take it, even though he didn't have money. The worker nearby allowed him to keep it. Jimmy took a sip. Almost immediately, he felt dizzy and collapsed. The unfamiliar taste and sensation overwhelmed him. His body, unaccustomed to such things, reacted quickly. Within seconds, he was unconscious. When his parents saw him, they rushed to his side. His mother insisted they take him home immediately. To her, this journey had gone too far, and she wanted to bring him back where he would be safe again. They carried him to the car. But as they prepared to leave, something unexpected happened. Morton, Jimmy's father, looked at his son and saw the sadness on his face. He understood something that his wife did not, or perhaps refused to accept. Jimmy needed to finish this. Quietly, without arguing, Morton unlocked the car door. When Jimmy regained consciousness, he didn't hesitate. He stepped out and began running again, continuing his journey. His mother returned just in time to see him escaping once more. She was furious. She demanded that Morton go after him, and once again, the chase resumed. But this time, they were not alone. The cult members, the circus performers, and the bikers all reappeared, each group still searching for Jimmy. The road turned into complete chaos. Everyone seemed to converge at the same time, creating confusion and noise everywhere. Vehicles collided, people shouted, and the situation spiraled out of control. Jimmy didn't look back. Ahead of him, he saw something unexpected, a plane preparing to take off. Without thinking, he ran toward it. With all the courage he had left, Jimmy climbed aboard just as it began to move. It was a risky decision, but it was his only chance to reach Niagara Falls in time. As the plane lifted into the sky, Jimmy finally had a moment to breathe. But even here, the journey held surprises. When he looked toward the pilot, he realized something unbelievable. The man flying the plane was connected to the taxi driver from earlier, someone from a story he had just heard. Jimmy couldn't help but feel that his entire journey was somehow coming together. Below him, the world stretched out in every direction. Ahead of him was Niagara Falls, and waiting there was Chloe. The plane carried Jimmy high above the landscape, moving quickly toward Niagara Falls. For the first time since leaving home, he was no longer struggling step by step along the ground. Instead, he was flying closer than ever to his destination. But even in the air, things did not go smoothly. The pilot, who introduced himself as Pippi, spoke casually as if nothing unusual was happening. Jimmy listened as he explained pieces of his life, including stories that connected back to the taxi driver Jimmy had met earlier. It all felt strange, like the different parts of Jimmy's journey were somehow linking together. As they approached Niagara Falls, the powerful sound of rushing water filled the air. From above, the view was breathtaking. The massive waterfall stretched wide, with water crashing down into the river below. Mist rose into the sky, catching the light and creating a scene Jimmy had only ever imagined. Even through the barrier of his suit, he could feel the intensity of it. But suddenly, the plane shook. Something went wrong. For a brief moment, it seemed like they might crash. Pippi struggled to control the aircraft as it dipped dangerously close to the rushing water. Jimmy held on, his heart racing. At the last second, the plane lifted again. But the sudden movement threw Jimmy off balance. Before he could react, he was pulled out of the aircraft and sent falling toward the water below. The world spun around him as he dropped. Then he hit the river. The impact was strong, but his protective suit absorbed most of it. The current pulled him along, dragging him toward the edge of the falls. Jimmy fought to stay upright, struggling against the force of the water. He didn't have time to think. He was swept over the edge. The fall was fast and overwhelming. Water surrounded him as he plunged downward, disappearing into the mist. For a moment, everything felt weightless. Then he hit the surface below. The force pushed him deep underwater, but the suit held. With effort, he managed to rise again, gasping as he reached the surface. The roar of the waterfall echoed around him as he fought his way to safety. Against all odds, he survived. Soaked and exhausted, Jimmy pulled himself onto solid ground. His body trembled, but his determination remained unshaken. He looked ahead. The wedding had already begun. Inside the church, Chloe stood at the front, dressed for the ceremony. Guests filled the room, watching as she and Mark faced each other. The moment had arrived. The vows were being spoken. Jimmy forced himself to move, running as fast as he could despite everything he had just endured. Each step brought him closer. Inside, Chloe was asked the final question. Did she accept Mark as her husband? Silence followed. She hesitated. Her voice did not come. At that exact moment, the doors opened. Jimmy entered. Everyone turned in shock as the strange figure in the protective suit walked into the church. Chloe's eyes widened, and her expression changed instantly. Relief, surprise, and something deeper filled her face. Jimmy had made it. Mark, however, was furious. He demanded that Jimmy leave immediately, unwilling to let anything interrupt the ceremony. But Jimmy stood his ground. For the first time, he spoke without fear. Slowly, he reached for the seal of his suit. Everyone watched in disbelief as he opened it. This was the moment he had been warned about his entire life. The moment he had always been told would be dangerous. But Jimmy didn't hesitate. He said that he would rather spend one single minute holding the person he loved than live his entire life without ever knowing what that felt like. The room fell silent. Then he stepped forward. He asked Chloe one simple question: if he could kiss the bride. She didn't hesitate. Chloe moved toward him, and for the first time, they touched. Their lips met in a quiet, meaningful moment that seemed to stop time itself. It was their first kiss, and their last. As soon as it ended, Jimmy collapsed. Gasps filled the room. Chloe rushed to his side, calling his name, trying to wake him. Fear spread through the crowd as they watched the boy who had come so far fall motionless on the ground. Then, from the back of the church, a voice cried out. It was his mother. She rushed forward, followed by his father, and behind them all the people Jimmy had met along his journey. The room was filled with faces from every part of his adventure, all drawn together at this final moment. Everyone waited, hoping, but unsure of what would happen next. The church was filled with silence as everyone gathered around Jimmy. Chloe knelt beside him, holding him gently, her voice trembling as she called his name again and again. She refused to believe that this was the end. Mrs. Livingston pushed through the crowd, her face filled with fear. For years, she had done everything she could to protect her son. Now, seeing him lying still in front of her, she felt that all of it might have been for nothing. Morton stood beside her, calmer but deeply affected. He looked at Jimmy, then at his wife as if urging her to say something important. Chloe, still holding Jimmy, spoke through her tears. She confessed what she had never fully said before. She told him that she had always loved him, not out of pity, not out of kindness, but truly and deeply. Her words hung in the air. Then Morton turned to his wife. He told her it was time to tell the truth. Mrs. Livingston hesitated. For years, she had carried a secret, believing it was the only way to keep her son safe. But now there was no reason to hide it any longer. With a shaking voice, she finally spoke. She revealed that when Jimmy was 4 years old, his body had already developed immunity. He was no longer in danger the way he had been as a baby. The doctors had confirmed it, but she hadn't told him. Out of fear of losing him, she chose to keep him inside the bubble. She convinced him and everyone else that he still needed protection. She controlled his world, believing that it was the only way to keep him safe. The truth stunned everyone. For Jimmy, the words slowly reached him. As if pulled back by the sound of his mother's confession, he began to stir. His eyes opened. First there was confusion, then realization. All those years, all that time spent inside the bubble, all the limits he had accepted without question. He looked at his mother. There was pain in his expression, a deep sadness at everything he had missed. But there was also something else, understanding. Mrs. Livingston broke down, apologizing over and over. She admitted her mistake, her fear, and the choices she had made. Jimmy listened, and then, despite everything, he forgave her. He told her that he still loved her. The moment was quiet but powerful. The years of control and protection gave way to something new: honesty, freedom, and acceptance. Jimmy stood up, steady now, no longer confined by fear or misunderstanding. He turned to Chloe. There was no hesitation this time, no barriers between them. They embraced, finally able to be close without anything separating them. The wedding that had been planned for Chloe and Mark came to an end before it could begin. Mark, realizing the truth of Chloe's feelings, stepped aside. Time passed. Months later, a new celebration took place, one filled with joy instead of uncertainty. Jimmy and Chloe were married. This time there were no interruptions, no fear, and no barriers. The ceremony brought together everyone who had been part of Jimmy's journey. Push Pop was there, now surrounded by followers who respected him. The circus performers arrived as well, along with the bikers and even Slim. Each person represented a piece of the world Jimmy had discovered. Even Pippi appeared, no longer separated from his past, having made peace with the people he had once left behind. Jimmy's parents were there too. Mrs. Livingston had changed. She no longer tried to control her son's life. Instead, she stood beside him, proud and supportive, learning to let go of her fears. As the celebration ended, Jimmy and Chloe prepared to leave for their honeymoon. This time, Jimmy stepped forward freely, without a suit, without a barrier, and without fear. For the first time in his life, he was truly part of the world. And surrounded by the people who had shaped his journey, Jimmy finally understood what it meant to live.